Hello everybody and welcome back to another video with me, Lorcana. With set 6, Azurite Sea now being fully revealed, it's time to take a look at the cards that are worth talking about. Oh, no, you're okay, you're very nice, it's just, I don't think you'll be played. Sorry. In this video, we'll be looking at the Amber and Amethyst cards, but there'll be another 2 videos focusing on the other colours, because there's so many interesting cards to look at, and to put it in one video, it'd just be too long. Now the cards I'm going to be talking about today aren't necessarily going to be the top cards in the set, but are ones that I wanted to talk about the most. Some of them because I think they will be the top cards of the set, but some of them just because they bring interesting new things into the game. And as always, if you do enjoy this video, then please drop a like or even a subscribe if you're feeling extra generous. It really helps the channel and I'd love to see you all around here again. So without further ado, let's get into it. So the first card we're going to talk about today is Lilo, Escape Artist. And I'm sure many of you probably saw this coming. Lilo is the first card in Lorcana that basically has a recursion effect, and that is to say that she's allowed to be played from the discard pile. The downside is that when you do play her from the discard pile, she comes in exerted. But it's interesting that every Lilo in your discard pile is basically a permanent card in your hand until you choose to play it, and a card that can't be discarded nonetheless, because it's already discarded. Now I understand people being really excited about this card being in aggressive decks with it being a 2-lore quester, especially with that low ink cost of 2, but what I'd say to that is check out this card. Sleepy. Is he not just a better statted version of Lilo if she was being played from the discard? And did he see play at all? Nuh-uh. Yeah, unfortunately I see why this card is being talked about a lot, but I think ultimately it's just really easy to get rid of. Coming in exerted as a 1 attack 2 willpower character is just not really enough, and it's going to get taken off the board by almost anything that breathes on it. Of course it does then force your opponent to deal with each copy of Lilo every turn if you decide to play it every turn, but I'm not entirely convinced that that'll be the most difficult job. It's not as if you get to play it for free, you'd still have to pay the ink cost to cast it from your discard. I mean, maybe there's a deck out there that's going to control the board and then just flood it with discarded Lilos, making it very difficult for your opponent to handle them all, but I just can't see it yet. The next card that certainly gathered a lot of attention is Tiana, Restaurant Owner. And the reason that this card gathered so much attention is it has an effect that we haven't really seen before, in which she makes it tougher to challenge other characters you control. Opposing challenging characters will get -3 attack unless your opponent pays 3 ink for that effect to be ignored. But one problem, she has to be exerted for this effect to take place, and her stat line is pretty awful. Yeah, 1 strength and 4 willpower is not fantastic, and yes, the effect does also apply to herself, but I just can't see her being played simply due to the fact that 1-4 is a terrible stat line and she's also uninkable, so you're going to have to justify an uninkable slot for her as well, and I just don't think she's a good enough card to justify that uninkable slot. But with that being said, paying 3 ink on your turn to get rid of this character is actually going to be quite frustrating and will slow your opponents down a lot. But yeah, I just don't think quite enough to justify that uninkable slot. And now over to the other legendary in Amber, and that is Simba, Pride Protector. And my goodness, this card is cracked. Simba's a 5-cost uninkable 4/4 that quests for 2 and can be shifted onto a little version of Simba for a cost of 3. And funnily enough, we have some great shift targets already that are very playable. On top of that, and this is the best bit, at the end of your turn, if this character is exerted, you may ready all of your other characters. That's right, all of them. This card in an aggro deck or even Steel Song to protect your singers is going to be absolutely off the charts good. And on top of that, he costs 5, so you can even sing A Whole New World if you really want him to. He'll be exerted when he does. So your other characters are going to ready anyway. Yeah, I can't express how good I think this card is, and I think you'll definitely see it played in more than one version of an Amber deck. And another one for those aggro players is our 1-cost action, Good Job. And this card lets a chosen character quest for an extra 1 lore this turn. And yes, it does require a character to play it on, but this basically reads pay 1, gain 1 lore. and it's inkable. Gathering Knowledge and Wisdom is played, and that's uninkable, and it's gained 2 lore for 2. This is a very similar card, except it requires a character to play it on, so that is probably why it's inkable instead of uninkable. But still, I think it has a home in aggro decks, and I think you'll see it in hyper aggro especially. Oh boy, Naveen's Ukulele. Well, this is a 1-cost item that you can pay 1 ink to banish it, and it will let a character count as having an extra +3 singer value on that turn. So yes, that does mean that little Cinderella can now sing Whole New World. I mean, heck, even Mr. Smee could bust it out if he wanted to. And let's not even mention the obvious synergy with Ursula, Deceiver of All. Being able to double sing songs up to a value of 6 is going to be pretty crazy in some scenarios. Like double singing We Don't Talk About Bruno, for example. Sounds pretty good, right? Of course, to do that, you would have to be playing Amber Emerald, but it's a synergy to keep in mind for sure. And overall, what this card does is it just opens up the option to have your lower cost things sing bigger songs. And that might then enable your higher cost characters to either quest or challenge if they need to. I mean, geez, this thing's gonna let 1-drops sing songs like Along Came Zeus. But then I'm left here thinking, is this card too situational to find a place in a deck? And that maybe it will only end up being played in decks that are Amber Emerald, where you can synergize it with Ursula, Deceiver of All, and double sing an expensive song. Moving on to our first location we're going to talk about, and that is Sugar Rush Speedway. Now I know what you're thinking, wow, 6 to move something there, that's quite a lot, Hazmat. And I would agree with you, and if you don't have a way to move something to a location for free, this is probably going to be a terrible card to play. But imagine that you do have something to move a character to a location for free. Say Jim Hawkins, Magic Carpet, then that would allow you to banish this location and gain 3 lore and draw 3 cards, which is nuts. But of course the problem is it does require a bit of setup, so I'm not sure if it will be played, but the idea of being able to blow this location up and draw 3 cards and gain 3 lore, potentially for free, is quite cool. So those were the cards from Amber that I thought were worth talking about most. Now let's move on to Amethyst. And what better place to start than with the White Rose, Jewel of the Garden. This card is a 3-cost inkable with a nice 3/3 stat line. It quests for 1, however when you play it you gain 1 lore. Now as we all know, characters that can enable you to win from hand are pretty favoured, and this will be no exception, especially because its stat line is pretty good for a 3-cost. Other than that, there's not that much to say about this card. It doesn't do anything spectacularly brand new, but it is just a solid card, and I think you can expect to see it being played. Tinkerbell, Fast Flier, gets a special mention here, not because I think it's a particularly amazing card, it's basically the red Minnie Mouse, and although that did see play at one point, it doesn't anymore. So why am I even talking about this card? Well, because in Purple Steel it's actually a fantastic shift target for turn 4 Big Tink. Or if you're in this situation where having a evasive 2-quester would actually be pretty good, then just keep her on the field. I'm just saying, it's a decent enough card on its own, but also it will always present that threat of Shift Giant Tink, and your opponent will be playing around that for sure. Which can actually be really handy for you even if you don't have it. Diablo, Obedient Raven. Yes, another playable Diablo. And this card's fairly self-explanatory. It's basically Cusco, but it costs 1 less and has 1 less of each stat. I can almost 100% guarantee you that this card will be replacing Magic Broom in almost all purple decks, apart from those people still trying to make Broom decks work. If you were a hyper aggro player and you wanted to play Pinocchio, but he's uninkable, and also he dies to pretty much everything, hey, what if there was a card that, yeah, maybe costed 1 more, but was inkable, and quested for the same amount, and had 3 health? Well, look no further, because here it is. It's right here. Magic Carpet, Amazing Flyer. Woohoo! It's vanilla, meaning that it doesn't have any other additional effects, so it may not get played, but it's still a fantastic quester with good willpower, and it's inkable. So maybe it has a place in hyper aggro. Uh-oh. Is this what I think it is? Is this a replacement for Rabbit? It might just be. Genie Wish Fulfilled, a 2/4 evasive. When you play him, you get to draw a card. And not only that, he quests for 2. I think this card's insane. It's got a great stat line for an evasive, and he's going to quest for 2 every turn once he's played and drawn you a card. Just think he's going to be really hard to deal with being evasive and that stat line. But on top of that, he still draws you a card. I mean, yes, he doesn't draw you a card when he leaves play, but my goodness, I think the positives outweigh that one slight negative. I think if we do see this card, it will be a direct replacement for Merlin Rabbit. But we'll see. Perhaps in more control-orientated decks, they'll favour Rabbit simply because they're likely to draw more cards from it. Perhaps we'll see Genie in decks like Emerald Amethyst, who look to play a bit more aggressive. Yzma, the Conniving Chemist, was one of the first cards to actually be revealed from this set. I don't see a lot of people actually talking about her much anymore. I think she has a place in maybe an aggressive deck that burns through their cards, or even just as a tool to fight the discard decks, which will inevitably still exist. And yes, she has to exert herself to use this ability, but a 3/3 stat line isn't too bad, and we'll still trade into a few things. Mad Hatter, Eccentric Host. I really want to like this card, but its survivability just lets it down massively. And it's a shame because being able to have this level of power over your opponent's next draw is pretty good. However, it will just die on the turn after it's done its effect. But if there's a world in which this can be kept alive, it's a pretty cool card. I'm mentioning it here purely because it's an effect that I don't think we've seen much of before, where you can actually take a look at your opponent's next card. I know that there are cards such as Merlin Cottage, but that allows you both to see the next card, whereas this just lets you look at their top card and choose whether you want them to draw it on the next turn or for it to be discarded. Now here's an interesting one for you. Maleficent Staff. So this is a 2-cost inkable item, and basically whenever one of your opponent's characters, items or locations is returned to their hand, you gain a lore. Well, first and foremost, against Ruby Amethyst and Green Purple, these are 2 decks that don't actually have too much interaction with items typically, and so this will be quite useful in just sitting there and gaining passive lore as they attempt to bounce things. On top of that, there's a world where entire decks are built around this. Decks that purely focus on bouncing your opponent's cards back to their hand with things such as Mother Gothel or Mother Knows Best, Kick Cloud Kicker, and heck, Milo Thatch would have some insane value here. I know that's a bit of a pipe dream, but hey, the idea's there, it could exist. And that's it. That's my roundup of the Amber and Amethyst cards from the new set that I think are worth talking about. Hopefully you agree with my opinions, and hopefully some of these inspire you to build new decks. Don't forget, I'll be releasing 2 more of these videos, one that covers Emerald and Steel cards, and one that covers the Sapphire and Ruby cards. But until then, I've been Hazmat Lorcana, you've been you guys, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!